and I thank you all for this opportunity. And to the President and Chairman of Council of the Institute of Chartered Secretaries and Administrators of Nigeria, ICSAN, Mr. Bode Ayeku, members of Council, the keynote speakers, panelists, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. Let me start by congratulating ICSA for organizing this special forum, and add that I do feel honored to play the easy role of just being chairman of this occasion, because I think Oyin is going to do all the facilitation. And I also welcome the keynote speakers that have been introduced to you earlier on. The topic for discussion that's been mentioned today is managing unclaimed dividends, unutilized funds in dormant bank accounts, issues, options, and way out. I know that this has become a very topical issue with a lot of pros and cons, and I must admit that even I'm going through a continuous learning experience as we have these various discussions. And what I'm also discovering is that the more you know about it, the more you begin to see it in different ways. But we'll try and see how we can, by the end of today, have some knowledge, understanding of what we hope to get out of this, and hoping it can be a very positive exercise. So let me just spend a few minutes to create what I call a context, for which I hope some of the questions I raised and thoughts I have on this matter will be addressed by our very distinguished and competent speakers. As been said earlier on, all this started with the Finance Act, the act which was signed into law on the 31st of December 2020. The effective date was the 1st of January 2021, and it amended some major fiscal laws in Nigeria, like the Fiscal Responsibility Act, Stamp Duties Act, amongst others. Now, given the lessons that we learned from the pandemic that has sort of bothered the whole world, and as part of planning for crisis-related expenditure and other exigencies, because remember that when we had the pandemic, we had to have all kinds of initiatives springing up in all directions, including the banks and various corporate entities coming together to try and see how we can fund what we saw and we still see as a major attack on the health system of the country. So this act establishes the Crisis Intervention Fund. And further, as a sub-fund of this Crisis Intervention Fund, the act also establishes the Unclaimed Funds Trust Fund. So the Unclaimed Funds Trust Fund is to be funded through unclaimed dividends and unutilized funds in dormant bank accounts, together with the unutilized funds. So specifically, the act provides that any unclaimed dividend of a public limited liability company quoted on the Nigerian Stock Exchange, and any unutilized amounts in a dormant bank account maintained in or by a deposit money bank, which has remained unclaimed for a period of not less than 6 years from the date of declaring the dividend or domiciling the funds in a bank account, shall be transferred immediately to the Unclaimed Funds Trust Fund. And this transfer is to be made by the public limited liability company, registrar, or deposit or money bank. So it is clear, therefore, that private companies and unlisted public companies are not affected. In addition, the Act does not make a distinction between dormant accounts held by individuals or companies. All are subject to the Act insofar as they are dormant accounts. So the only exceptions to the foregoing are official bank accounts owned or belonging to the federal government, state government, or local government, or any of their ministries, department, or agencies. So that's sort of a broad background, and I'm sure the other speakers are going to go in a bit more detail. A few concerns that I have, or different people have shared, and I just want to raise. I think the first concern raised by these measures is whether this legislative takings, by the state makes any sense, in the sense that it's like, why would you want to do this? And I'm hoping that the discussants will explain the foundation and the basis why getting money from these dormant accounts, which is almost like free funds in a way, might not be seen as a kind of a short-termist approach to addressing deep-seated structural problems, which we hope further down the line won't create more complications. So it is important to also know how long this law will be in place. What is the sunset date of the fund, if there's any? And what happens where no claims are ever brought? So it's sort of like an endless supply of funds. And we all know how we all feel sometimes about the way government spends, maybe not particularly any this one, but future governments, and how one can manage. And I know there's an administrative system in place, and I hope that will be explained to us as well, to give comfort as to the fact that, okay, these funds will be looked after in a way that they won't be out of control. I think the second mismatch, which somebody has mentioned to me, is that between CAMA, which is the primary legislation on company law and the Finance Act, is bound to create problems because of the mismatch. CAMA entitles a shareholder to bring a claim for dividends within 12 years. The Finance Act entitles the government to appropriate the dividends after 6 years. So CAMA allows the company to distribute unclaimed dividends after 12 years as part of profits. Now, this divergence effectively creates competing claims between the shareholder and the company and the state. So I'm hoping that some clarity will be given between with respect to this mismatch that was mentioned. Another item is for the capital market. There will conceivably be consequences, because by exposing dividends on securities held in listed companies to potential expropriatory measures of the state, it may dampen interest in investing in the capital market. We don't know. Because you see, from an investor perspective, what is to stop the government from even further shortening the range of time to taking unclaimed dividends? So for the capital market, there are issues that we've got to look at, and I hope again some explanations will be given. In addition, it is likely to speed up the growing trend of delisting of securities from the securities exchanges. In as much as the public loves a government that cares for the welfare of the people, a clear dichotomy between public and private assets and state powers to take what belongs to a private citizen has always been a fundamental part of our democratic free market society. So we want to be sure that overregulation, undue state interference, and overreach into private assets are simply going to cool corporate interest in having securities listed. So we've got to be careful about this, and we want to hear how one can be protected from this. Then the determination of the yield to be paid on the unutilized funds, given that the Act does not specify an interest rate. So it is thus imperative for the DMO to indicate the applicable rate as soon as possible, to sort of know that it isn't money that's just gone out and there's no sort of return on investment on the potential claimant in the future. So from a signaling perspective, the clear message which the government is sending out to the market is that why can it not simply go to the capital markets or to the financial markets, domestic or international, to borrow funds? And why would it do it from these dormant funds that seem to have no owner, so to speak? Another issue is whether this may arise to it creates, how do we deal with funds which are never claimed at all, which is what I mentioned earlier on. I think these are a lot of issues that I'm just throwing out there, and I'm sure that there are many more that have been raised from time to time, especially since this bill was passed into law. And I'm hoping that when all our discussions get going, we would be in a position to have some kind of a solution, some kind of clarity. And my closing remark is that the fundamental thing about all these things is trust. We must always be able to have trust in the system, trust in the government, knowing fully well that whatever is being done in the best interest of society to improve the quality of all our lives. So that's what I have to say as opening statement, and I hope that all the other speakers will sort of do even much greater justice and explain all these things. So over to you, Oyi. Thanks very much.